They thought humans would send aid. Not a full fleet. HFY Story Part 1. The signal that wasn't a plea. The first mistake the galaxy made was assuming silence meant weakness. The second mistake was assuming humanity was asking for help. It started with a cracked transmission drifting through the Hadrian Expanse, a sector nobody patrolled anymore because nothing survived long enough there to be worth mapping twice. The signal was weak. Fragmented. Half corrupted by radiation storms and dead satellites spinning like broken teeth in orbit. But the message was clear. Unknown civilization detected. Requesting aid. Priority, survival. The Galactic Concordat reacted the way it always did when a new species cried out. Slowly. Bureaucratically. Indifferently. Aid Committee 9 classified humanity as pre-space industrial, non-hostile, low-risk salvage candidate. Translation, not important. A relief mission was approved. Minimal escort. No warships. Just a diplomatic recovery vessel, the Bright Mercy, carrying medical drones, translators, and 24 observers who had never seen real combat in their lives. Commander Vale Soren, a seasoned officer of the Zenthri Union, reviewed the mission file and sighed. Another primitive species panicking at its own atmosphere collapse. He muttered. We pick them up, stabilize them, and they worship us for a century. A junior officer frowned. Sir, the signal also contains navigation data. It's precise. Soren waved it off. All dying species become poets at the end. The Bright Mercy jumped into the Hadrian Expanse. None of them noticed the dead pirate fleets drifting silently nearby, ships cut clean in half, no distress beacons, no survivors. Just absence. Earth, however, was not dying. It was watching. Deep inside what the galaxy thought was a primitive rock, sat listening stations older than the Concordat itself, buried under oceans, deserts, and mountain cores. And they had sent the signal. Not a cry for help. A lure. Captain Elias Ward leaned back in the chair aboard the ISS Requiem, Earth's oldest active deep space interdiction vessel. Cigarette smoke curled around his helmet despite the life support warnings blinking red. Did they take the bait? He asked. Lieutenant Marachan didn't look up from her console. Hooked clean. They're calling us a salvage case. Ward chuckled. It wasn't a happy sound. Salvage case? He repeated. That's cute. Chen hesitated. Command says no engagement unless fired upon. Ward finally looked at her. His eyes were tired in the way only men who've buried colonies can be. Command still thinks this is a rescue mission? Chen didn't answer. That was answer enough. Outside the viewport, Earth hung behind them like a loaded gun nobody admitted was cocked. Ward tapped ash into a sealed tray. How many ships did we lose to these unknowns before we learned their language? Chen's voice went quiet. 17 colonies. 3 fleets. 1 was your brother's convoy. Ward's jaw tightened. Then he smiled. That's what I thought. He stood. Open the channel. Across the void, the Bright Mercy received an incoming transmission. Commander Soren adjusted his uniform. Finally. Let's hear the grateful primitives. The signal opened. But it wasn't gratitude. It was laughter. Not chaotic. Not mad. Controlled. Measured. Human. Then a voice followed, calm, male, older. This is Captain Elias Ward of Soul Defense Command. You are trespassing in a restricted reclamation zone. Turn around. Soren blinked. Reclamation zone? A science officer scoffed. They're bluffing. They don't even have FTL signatures in there. The ship shook. Not from impact. From mass distortion. 3 shapes unfolded from dark space like knives being slowly drawn from a sheath. Human ships. No Concordat registry recognized them. No alien database contained their design signatures. They weren't warships in the traditional sense. They were something worse. They looked like tools built by people who never intended to lose. Soren stood abruptly. Raise shields. The tactical officer froze. Sir, they're already inside minimum firing range. That's impossible. A second voice came through the channel. Not Ward. Another human. Younger. Amused. Hey, space cops, the voice said. You boys lost? The Bright Mercy scanners screamed. Energy readings spiked beyond classification thresholds. Then one of the human ships rotated slightly. And fired. No warning shot. No diplomacy. Just a single beam of compressed gravitational shear. The escort frigate beside the Bright Mercy ceased to exist. Not destroyed. Erased. Space folded where it had been. Silence returned. Then Ward's voice came back on the channel, softer now. You misunderstood the signal. A pause. We weren't asking for help. Soren's hands trembled. What are you talking about? Your message. Chen leaned forward on Ward's ship, eyes cold. Commander, she said quietly, play the full transmission. A new audio file opened across Concordat channels. It was Earth's original signal. But layered beneath it was something else. Hidden in harmonic distortion. A second message. One that had been encrypted so deeply it bypassed alien linguistics entirely. Only now, with proximity lock established, did it decode. Soren's face drained of color. The translation appeared on his console. If you are listening, you are close enough to die here. The Bright Mercy's alarms went off. Too late. Ward's voice returned one final time in part 1. Welcome to Soul Space. Then everything went dark. The First Fleet breaks. The galaxy would later call it the Bright Mercy Incident. Humans called it Tuesday. Inside the Concordat command lattice, panic didn't begin immediately. At first, it was confusion, cold, professional disbelief that a pre-industrial species had erased a frigate in open space without a trace. Then came denial. Then silence. Then the screaming started. Commander Vale Soren stood frozen as his tactical screen refused to refresh the destroyed ship's signature. There was nothing to track. No debris field. No survivors. No energy residue consistent with known weapons. Just empty space where reality used to be. That's not possible. Someone whispered behind him. A second human vessel slid into view, cutting across the starfield like a blade being tested on glass. Then a third. Then more. Not a fleet in the Concordat sense, organized, ceremonial, predictable. This was something else. Irregular spacing. Asymmetric formations. No obvious flagship. Like they didn't believe in losing a single point of failure. Soren snapped back into command mode. All ships, defensive formation. Return fire authorization granted. A nervous officer hesitated. Sir, the engagement rules are dead, Soren shouted. The Bright Mercy finally reacted, deploying Concordat standard shielding grids. It felt like putting parchment paper in front of a meteor. Across the void, Captain Elias Ward watched the alien formation stabilize. Cute, Ward muttered. Lieutenant Chen replied. They're trying layered deflection shields. Old doctrine. Pre-unification tech. Ward exhaled smoke slowly. So they do have a military history. Oh yeah, Chen said. Just not one that accounts for us. Ward smiled. It wasn't warmth. It was memory. Fire line 1, he said. The human ships didn't fire like Concordat vessels. There were no luminous bolts, no slow plasma arcs drifting across space like theatrical warnings. Instead, space itself seemed to stutter. 3 Concordat escorts vanished as if they had blinked out of existence between heartbeats. Inside the Bright Mercy, systems failed in cascading waves. Gravity plating reversed. Artificial atmosphere oscillated between vacuum and crushing density. Medical drones melted mid-air. Soren grabbed the console. What is that weapon? A science officer screamed. It's not energy-based. It's rewriting local space-time geometry. That's not a weapon class. It is now. The human voice returned calm again, almost conversational. You're clustering too tight. A pause. That's going to hurt you. Then the second volley hit. 2 Concordat cruisers detonated from the inside out, no external impact, no visible strike. Their hulls folded inward like crushed cans, collapsing under sudden and precise gravitational inversion. Panic spread across the alien bridge. Soren slammed his fist down. Return fire! Everything we've got! Plasma cannons fired. Particle beams lanced outward. Missiles launched in coordinated waves. But every human ship simply wasn't where the targeting system said they were. They moved wrong. Not faster. Not evasive. Just absent from prediction space. Lieutenant Chen watched the chaos unfold. They're using probabilistic masking, she said. Ward raised an eyebrow. Speak human. They're not dodging fire, she said. They're making your targeting math fail before it resolves. Ward nodded. So they're guessing. No, Chen corrected. We are. A distant explosion lit up the dark as another Concordat vessel broke apart. Then another. Then another. The bright Mercy trembled as shockwaves rippled through space itself. Soren finally realized something fundamental. They were not fighting an equal opponent. They were being dissected. On the human side, the ISS Requiem's bridge remained eerily calm. No alarms. No panic. Only controlled efficiency. A young technician spoke up. Sir, Concordat formation is collapsing. They're attempting retreat vector. Ward tapped Ash again. Of course they are. He looked at the tactical map, burning points of alien ships flickering out one by one. Chen, he said. Yes, Captain? Cut off their escape. She hesitated. That violates. Ward's eyes flicked to her. Not angry. Worse. Tired. We stopped keeping Concordat rules after they'd burned Titan Colony 7. A pause. Then Chen nodded. Understood. She entered the command. And the space behind the alien fleet folded shut like a closing fist. The Concordat escape corridor vanished. Every ship now had only one direction left. Forward. Toward the humans. Soren noticed instantly. His voice cracked. They sealed the jump lanes. How did they even? A new transmission interrupted him. Ward again. But this time, the tone changed. Colder. Heavier. You came into our space and called it salvage. A pause. You killed miners. Farmers. Convicts. You didn't even declare war. Silence. Then Ward continued. We declared it for you. Soren swallowed. We didn't understand you were. The human cut him off. That's the problem. The bridge of the Bright Mercy went silent. Even alarms seemed to hesitate. Ward's voice lowered. Now you do! The final Concordat cruiser tried something desperate. It released a cascading EMP field designed to blind targeting systems and create a retreat window. It was a good tactic. For a civilization fighting something it could understand. The human response was immediate. Not reactive. Prepared. 3 human ships rotated in unison. And fired a synchronized pulse. No explosion. No flash. Just a thin ripple across spacetime like a stone dropped into a pond made of physics. The EMP field collapsed instantly. Then the cruiser followed. Soren staggered as his bridge lost half its systems. Report! Nothing came back. Then, from the tactical feed, a final image stabilized. The Concordat cruiser wasn't destroyed. It had been peeled. Layer by layer, its outer hull separated into perfectly aligned fragments, floating like a surgical diagram of a dead machine. A message appeared on all surviving channels. Engagement complete. Hostile formation neutralized. Ward's voice returned one last time. Quieter now. Almost disappointed. That was your first fleet. A pause. You brought a police escort to a graveyard. Silence. Then, don't send a second. The channel closed. And in the void of Hadrian expanse, what remained of the Concordat fleet drifted in broken formation, alive, but no longer functional as an army. Commander Vale Soren sank slowly into his chair. For the first time in his career, he understood something deeply uncomfortable. They were not the hunters. They were not even prey. They were inexperienced trespassers. And somewhere in the dark, humanity had stopped pretending to be anything else. Earth stops holding back. The Concordat didn't lose the battle. That would have been easier. Instead, it lost certainty. Across 1,000 systems, reports flooded in, fragmented, contradictory, panicked. Entire fleets describing the same impossible phenomenon, ships disappearing without debris, weapons that rewrote space, human vessels that refused to behave according to known physics. And worst of all, the humans had stopped hiding. For centuries, humanity had been a rumor. A primitive developing species. A border anomaly. A possible salvage case. Now, every classified Concordat database lit up with the same update. Species designation, humanity, Sol system. Status, unknown military classification. Threat index, uncalculable. In the high chamber of the Galactic Concordat, silence stretched for the first time in recorded political history. Then the arguing began. That was a rogue defense cell. No pre-FTL civilization can deploy space-time inversion weapons. They must have acquired alien tech. From who? They are the unknown region. And in the middle of it all, Admiral Vale Soren stood in front of the holoscreen, watching the replay of his fleet's destruction on loop. Every angle. Every frame. Every impossibility. A junior analyst finally spoke up, voice trembling. Sir, we've traced the origin signatures of their ships. Soren didn't look away. And? A pause. They all originate from Sol. The room went quiet again. Someone laughed nervously. One system built that? No one answered. Because the data didn't lie. Far away, in that same system, Earth was no longer waiting. It was assembling. Inside lunar shipyards buried beneath kilometers of regolith, something long forbidden by human policy was waking up. The Sol defense continuity doctrine had only 3 stages. Observe, warn, end it. For centuries, humanity had remained in stage 1. Now they had skipped 2 steps. Captain Elias Ward stood on the command deck of the ISS Requiem, watching the horizon of space fill with light. Not stars. Ships. Thousands of them. Not all human. Some were autonomous. Some were old Earth relics never disclosed to the Concordat. Some were things even Ward didn't like looking at too long. Lieutenant Chen stood beside him, unusually quiet. They've escalated, she said. Ward nodded. They finally realized we're not a border nuisance. Chen frowned. What are we now? Ward took a slow breath. An accounting error they can't correct. A new voice entered the bridge communication system. Earth command. Cold. Official. No emotion. Captain Ward? Authorization granted. A pause. You are cleared for full doctrine release. Ward closed his eyes for a second. When he opened them again, something in him had shifted. Not anger. Not rage. Finality. Copy, he said. Across the Concordat front, scanners began to fail en masse. Not from attack. From overload. Space near Sol was changing density. Changing structure. Like reality itself was being rearranged into something more efficient for war. Soren stared at the tactical display as red alerts multiplied. Report! He snapped. A technician screamed. They're activating corridor grids! Which species? Which fleet? The technician looked up slowly. All of them. Then the sky broke open. Human fleets emerged. Not in waves. Not in lines. But layered, like an ocean revealing depths no one knew existed. First came the patrol fleets. Fast. Surgical. Built for interception. Then came the war clusters. Heavily armored. Doctrine class. designed for sustained engagement. Then came the ancient vessels, ships that should have been decommissioned centuries ago, now reactivated like sleeping gods being remembered. And finally, the black hulls. No insignia. No registry. No diplomatic identifiers. Even human ships gave them distance. Ward saw them and muttered, "So they finally opened those bays." Chun looked uneasy. "I thought those were theoretical." Ward gave a humorless smile. "They were." A pause. "Until they weren't." The Concordat attempted one final diplomatic transmission. It was desperate. Polished. Carefully worded. "Humanity, we acknowledge misunderstanding. We propose immediate ceasefire negotiations and compensation protocols." The message cut off. A human transmission replaced it. Not Ward this time. Earth command again. "You are not negotiating a misunderstanding." Silence. Then, "You are responding to a record." The Concordat fleet froze. Even their captains felt it now. The tone wasn't anger. It wasn't hatred. It was administration. Like paperwork being processed. Then Earth Command continued. "You entered restricted systems. You destroyed protected colonies. You ignored repeated warnings. You escalated engagement after first contact clarification." A pause. Then the final line. "You are now receiving consequence phase." Ward watched the human fleets begin their advance. "Chen," he said quietly. "Yes, sir?" "You ever wonder why they called us backwater?" She nodded slowly. Ward gestured toward the unfolding armada. "Because they never saw the part of Earth we don't export." Chen swallowed. "And what part is that?" Ward didn't answer immediately. Then, survival that learned organization. The first strike wasn't dramatic. No explosions. No heroic speeches. Just coordinated absence. Entire Concordat defense grids went dark as human cyber warfare units severed command chains faster than they could be rerouted. Then came physical engagement. Human ships didn't rush forward. They closed angles. Every Concordat escape route collapsed one by one as if the battlefield itself had been drawn in advance. Soren watched in horror as tactical maps reshaped themselves into cages. "We're being boxed in," he whispered. A senior officer grabbed him. "Sir, we have to retreat." "There is no retreat," Soren said softly. Because he finally understood something. This wasn't a battle. It was containment. And somewhere in the middle of it all, Ward's voice returned one last time in Part 3. Not to the Concordat, but to his own fleet. "Remember," he said calmly, "we didn't come to expand. We came to finish what they started." A pause. Then, quieter. "No survivors means no sequels." The human fleet advanced. And the galaxy realized something terrifying. Earth had stopped reacting. And started concluding. The galaxy learns the price of humanity. The war didn't end with a bang. It ended with a decision. Across Concordat space, systems began falling silent one after another, not from destruction, but from surrender protocols triggered too late to matter. Human fleets didn't chase fleeing ships. They didn't need to. Every major Concordat command node was already compromised, every war corridor sealed, every logistics spine cut cleanly at the source. It was like watching a civilization realize, mid-thought, that it had already lost the argument it was trying to have. Admiral Vale Soren stood alone on the cracked bridge of the Bright Mercy, now drifting in fractured orbit around a dead moon. Around him, consoles flickered between emergency red and empty black. No reinforcements were coming. No rescue fleets existed anymore. Only silence. Then the human fleet arrived. Not aggressively. Not theatrically. Just present. Hundreds of ships formed a wide perimeter around the surviving Concordat vessels like a courtroom forming around a verdict. Captain Elias Ward's voice came through one final time. Calm. Exhausted. Final. This is the sole enforcement perimeter. All hostile assets are contained. A pause. Then. You are out of war. Soren laughed once. It came out broken. Out of war? He echoed. You annihilated our fleets, cut our systems, erased our escape routes, and you call this out of war? Ward didn't respond immediately. When he did, his voice was quieter than before. No. We ended what you started long before you met us. On Earth, the political chambers were silent. No celebration broadcasts. No victory parades. No heroic speeches. Only sealed reports marked with classifications so high they had no public translation. Inside those reports, one line was repeated across all divisions. Contact phase concluded. Species survival probability reassessed, stable. Stable. Not safe. Not peaceful. Stable. Lieutenant Chen stood beside Ward on the Requiem, watching the last Concordat warships power down. They're surrendering, she said. Ward nodded slowly. That's what it looks like when something stronger decides you're not worth continuing. Chen frowned. Is that mercy? Ward considered that for a long moment. Then, no, he said. It's efficiency. A Concordat diplomat, one of the few still authorized to transmit, sent a final message. It was no longer arrogant. No longer political. Just human in its desperation. What do you want from us? The galaxy waited for Earth's answer. There was a delay. Not technical. Deliberate. Then Earth Command responded. Nothing. A pause. Confusion rippled through surviving systems. Then the message continued. That is the point. Soren closed his eyes. He finally understood. Humans hadn't been expanding. They hadn't been invading. They hadn't even been retaliating in the way the Concordat understood war. They were correcting a boundary violation. Like removing a contaminant from a controlled environment. A junior officer whispered. We were the threat? Soren didn't answer. Because he realized something worse. They hadn't even been the threat. They had been the test. And they had failed immediately. Ward stood at the observation deck, staring at the wreckage fields drifting through space. Chin joined him quietly. So what now? She asked. Ward exhaled. Now we decide what they get to remember. She looked at him. We're letting them live? Ward nodded. Most of them, yeah? Chin frowned. Why? Ward's eyes stayed on the stars. Because if we erase everyone who mistakes silence for weakness, he said slowly, we become the thing we were trying to stop. A long pause. Then he added, almost quietly. And because someone has to be left to tell the story right. The Concordat remnants were given terms. Strict ones. Disarmament. System withdrawal. Restricted navigation zones around Sol space marked permanently in all galactic charts. And a final warning embedded into every archive, every military database, every communication relay. Do not assume silence is ignorance. Do not assume quiet is weakness. Do not assume humanity is alone. Months later, Soren would stand in exile on a neutral world, watching star charts of what used to be Concordat territory. A journalist once asked him what humanity was like. He took a long time to answer. Then said, They are not conquerors. A pause. They are consequences that learn to fly ships. Back on Earth, life continued. Wars ended. Memories were archived. Fleets went back to shadow rotation. And humanity returned, as it always did, to something far more dangerous than war. Normality. But in deep space, far beyond mapped lanes, patrol ships still whispered warnings across encrypted channels. Because every now and then, a new signal would appear at the edge of Concordat space. A weak one. A broken one. A hopeful one. And every species that received it now knew the truth. Not all cries for help are what they seem. Some are invitations. And some are traps written by survivors who ran out of patience. Yendi.